Bischoff.
Bischoff.
And it's Shane on the show. What do you know? It's time to go back to Florida. Back to Florida. Back to Florida. Ooh, with my guest, Shane Hartline. We're going back to Florida. A Florida friend.
I just had flashbacks.
Florida, yeah, to your last appearance on this episode, on this podcast. Shane Hartline, second time on the show, wrestler, comedian, friend of the pod, Floridian. Welcome to Florida Versus, Shane. How are you?
Dude, great to be back. Is there any other two-timers?
Corey Slater.
Okay, all right. Well, no. Well, just gonna have to be the first three-timer.
Corey's been on 3 times too.
Oh, damn it. Well, I'm glad to be back.
It's good to be here. It's good to have you, Shane. Welcome back to the program. As you know, listeners will know, Shane, as I said, comedian, friend of the podcast, old roommate of mine. Big wrestling fan, and has been involved in the industry in one way or another, you know, as either a fan or, you know, somebody that's been excited about it or, you know, participated in it for a while now. Before we get into all that and what we'll be talking about today, Shane, is there anything you'd like to plug up top? Doing the plugs up top.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of things, but I'll try to kind of narrow it down to a couple things. I would love to push, since we're talking about wrestling today, I have a wrestling podcast, a comedy wrestling podcast. I've been doing this character, Marky Extreme, for quite a while. And we started a podcast last year doing the characters, kind of deep diving into wrestling topics every week. And it's called the On Your Mark Wrestling Podcast. And you can find it on every podcast platform pretty much.
Awesome.
And then, you know, past that, I have a short film out called Cookie. It's available on Omeletto, youtube.com/Omeletto. And then, you know, just find me on socials and you can keep up with everything else I'm up to.
If you give us 2 more plugs, then you
I can easily.
Well, I'm going to ask you because last week's episode, Susie Dunn gave us 4 plugs, and that was the record at the time. So right now we have the On Your Mark podcast, your cookie, cookie short, your Instagram. Give me 2 more.
Yeah, Donut Punk Apparel. I started a clothing company. Why not? It's called donutpunk.com, and nostalgically baked apparel. And Peter Murphy's a proud wearer of Donut Punk.
I am a big fan. I've worn it on this show before. If anyone that's watching on YouTube has seen, and I wear it in my everyday life as well.
Okay, another plug. Let's see my TikTok. You know, find me on TikTok. I'm making millions of dollars on TikTok.
Dude, that's amazing, man.
Millions, Peter.
Of dollars?
Of dollars.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds cool.
Shane_Hartline on TikTok. Let's see. Let me get one last in so I can have the record.
Well, you have the record now with 5.
Okay, great. Then we're done. I don't want to plug anymore.
Sounds good. All right, Shane. So basically, if you could give us your history in wrestling, because there at one moment you were, you know, growing up in Florida, in Central Florida, you had access to these, you know, these training facilities, and you were, for all rights, you know, on your way to becoming a professional wrestler, right?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of did. I was doing it for a second, and you know, to backtrack a bit, some of my earliest memories I have is watching wrestling with my dad, and and so I was like, I had an interest in it at a very early age, and like many of us around our age, it's like the early memories of like Hulk Hogan and just larger than life, like cartoon characters brought to life, is like really why I think I was interested in it. Like Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, these guys that were just, you know, literally like cartoon characters that it was just so fun to watch. And I just always wanted to watch Hulk Hogan, but I got into it from a young age because my dad actually did it a little bit too independently.
Oh, wow.
In Florida. And back when he was doing it, wrestling wasn't on a national scale like it became with the WWF. He was doing it. There were these territories. So in Florida, it was Florida Championship Wrestling.
Right.
And he was training and never officially became a wrestler. And he has this like famous story he likes to tell. He's like, I met your mom, and the moment I met your mom, I quit wrestling.
Really?
And I'm like, okay, I'm sure there's more to it than that. But he was training with like Dusty Rhodes and all these like big names that went on to become these like legends in the business. And so I was very interested at a young age, I think, because he still was into watching it. And then that in turn turned into him taking me to some shows at a really young age. And, you know, in around like my age 10 to 12, like that was when wrestling hit a huge spike in NWO, Stone Cold Steve Austin, like that era of wrestling. And that was bigger than it's ever been. It will never, in my opinion, be as big as it was then.
Attitude Era. Yeah. The Attitude Era.
Yeah. I hope wrestling gets that big again. And I feel like we've had times where it's gotten close to that. And it's kind of hard to say now. This is a whole different subject of like, because the TV ratings are nowhere close to what they used to be, but people are watching wrestling on all different kinds of spectrums right now on, you know, YouTube's, cell phone, all kind of stuff. So, but that's when I really got into it. Like, I'm wearing this shirt now, but like, I'm like, this is the greatest memories I have of wrestling was like the NWO era, Hollywood Hogan, Sting. And so I really got interested in it to the point where I was like, oh, I'm going to be a wrestler. Like it was always acting and wrestling. But I was like, I'm going to be a wrestler to then become an actor, which is like the hardest path to become an actor.
Yeah. The only guy that's really been able to do it successfully, it has to be The Rock.
And like Batista.
Oh yeah. Of course.
Has also, and John Cena's starting to get to a good place. But even if you remember early on in The Rock's career, there were a few weird movies he did, like Tooth Fairy, and you know, so.
Oh yeah. And what else? He did The Scorpion King, which I guess was okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, okay for him. He got paid, you know.
Yeah, but you know, so I got into it. I'll never forget. I went to like a SmackDown show in Orlando, and I was like 15. And there was this dude on the outside just passing out flyers for his wrestling school. Oh, wow. And I was like, I'm 15. Can I take classes? He's like, yeah, whatever. And I probably shouldn't have been, but like, I like the next week started taking wrestling classes.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And so then you started to follow this dream of being a wrestler that would lead, you know, and then your goal was to eventually have that lead to you being an actor. And so then what happened after you were 15, after you were taking classes and, you know, training and that sort of stuff? Training is intense. You told me it was very
brutal,
intense.
Man. It's brutal. Like I'll never forget after the first wrestling class, and I was like at my peak in my weight. Like I was like 290 pounds at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I'll never forget after my first class, I like told my dad, I'm like, you know, maybe I'll just be like a wrestling manager or something. And he's like, hell, no way. You're gonna, and I'm so glad he did. Like, but he's like, you're gonna stick with it. You're gonna keep doing it. And it gets easier on the body because the shock and the like, you're literally doing things that the body's not engineered to do. Mm-hmm. And it's just like a shock to the system. So it like feels like after your first couple of wrestling classes, it feels like you literally have been beaten, tortured, because you're just like falling repeatedly and doing things that you're just not too used to, and probably a little concussed and whiplash and all sorts of things like that. But you know, over time it gets easier, and you're basically, it's like glorified stunt training. You're learning how to fall and safely fall, and then do things to other people that look very painful, and a lot of times aren't, but sometimes can still really be painful. There's some things in wrestling that are undeniable, like that are painful, like a Ric Flair chop, for instance. Like there's no way to fake that. You just got to go for it.
Right. Oh,
But so I started training when I was 15, and by I think 17, I had my first independent wrestling match. And then I was like off to
Really?
the races, and I was wrestling every weekend starting at age 17 in the state of Florida, like every weekend.
Wow.
Doing the independent circuit. And there was just like little companies. I probably wrestled for 5 to 10 little companies just in a loop.
That's awesome, throughout Florida. And you're talking about these independent territories. Basically, as I understand it, Vince McMahon roped up all these territories and united them to become the WWF, now the WWE, right?
Yeah, it was very controversial at the time because you had all of these different people that were running very successful territories and making a good living, and it was kind of a mutual understanding between everybody that in the wrestling industry that was like, okay, we have our territory, you have yours, and we kind of like do our things, and we'll occasionally like, you know, your superstars will go to your territory and we'll get some of yours. So it's like everybody was kind of working together, but also like respecting their stuff. And then Vince came in with this like bigger vision, and he's like, nope, I'm going to do this nationally. And he was very disliked for a long time, and probably still to this day by some of those people, because it changed the industry.
This is a combination of both of those thoughts, which is wrestling uniting and now the world of acting. And I want to know your take on this and how the conversation changed when you were training. So basically, a few years ago, there was this, you know, for actors, everyone was talking like FI-Corps, which means you're a SAG actor, like in the union, and what you're doing is you're giving up either some of your benefits, or you are not, you know, no longer paying dues, but you're still in the union on a different basis. But the reason why you're doing that is so that you can also audition for non-union stuff. And at the time, maybe 3 years ago, when people were talking about this, people were saying, if you go FI-Corps, you'll be blacklisted. Like, you'll never be able to join the union full again. You'll never get health insurance. You'll never be able to work in this town in union. And, you know, we'll remember that, et cetera, et cetera. But you got to remember that Screen Actors Guild is the only union that does not guarantee, the only union in the world that does not guarantee work. So at the time, it was, holy moly, you know, these people are making a huge risk. Now, even pre-pandemic, and especially post-pandemic, it's much more accepted that, you know, people will go FI-Corps and will go FI-Corps in that. And just over time, those people that were saying, oh, you'll get blacklisted, have sympathized with everybody's different kind of situation. With wrestling back then, when when Vince McMahon was roping everybody in, or WWF was kind of uniting everybody, or, you know, breaking down this territory system, did people at first, were they opposed to it, and did they eventually come around for whatever reason? And what was that reason?
Well, I think that, I mean, I don't know exactly, but what I assume is a lot of people were against it in the beginning because they felt like, and he did to an extent take away a lot of people's livelihoods.
Really?
You know, like a lot of these people that were making good money and they had their own businesses, like he did, those companies didn't immediately go out of business when he started the WWF and started scooping up the major stars from all these territories and nationally broadcasting his show, as opposed to each of these territories regionally broadcasting their shows.
Right.
But over time, the audience started shifting. They're like, oh, why are we watching this when the WWF has got all the big stars,
right,
and it's the hot ticket, you know? So it didn't happen immediately, but over time they did start going out of business, and that's what started, I think, rubbing people the wrong way. But then a lot of those people that he put out of business eventually came to work for him and probably ended up making more money because, you know, there was just more money to be made nationally versus regionally.
Yeah, and so they eventually came around because the audience was only interested in the national stage or like this one place.
Yeah.
And so then it just in your journey, at what point did you come up with your gimmick and what was it?
Oh God. I mean, I had many failed
Oh,
gimmicks
really? You had a bunch of
that I'm very glad I didn't end up doing. Like one of them was this like woman's man, like Sugar
like
Shane
Val Venus?
not like a porn star, but like
Okay.
I was just like, I came to the ring with like 3 hot chicks and like I was Sugar Shane Hartline, but I was also 17 and like every dude in the audience hated me because I'm this like shit talking 17-year-old. And but I'll never forget, and I'm not joking, and you know my dad, he's a man of few words, very like, you know, no pun intended, stone cold.
Right.
But I'll never forget, and this was when I was like just getting into wrestling, and I think I don't even think I had my first match yet, but he came to me and he's like, I had a dream last night. You're going to be named Rip Malibu. And you're going to be a surfer. And I'm like, that's kind of genius. And like, my dad's never came to me with bit ideas, comedy ideas, ever, anything.
Yeah.
But he's like, I had a dream and this is the name and this is the wrestler. And I'm like, and at the time I like had long curly blonde hair and I did look a lot like I surfed and I was tan and looked very different than I do now. And it worked, man, like real quick. And I was one of the first guys at that time in the business in independent wrestling circuit in Florida that was like really capitalizing on selling t-shirts and like pictures. And I was doing really well very quickly, which also there were a couple guys that didn't like that. Yeah. And so I would get my ass kicked a lot in those like paying your dues years, you know, like many broken noses and like many times where I'm like, I don't think you're supposed to be hitting me this hard. Like, but like, you know, I was making a name for myself really quickly. Also because you know, I think I was more interested in the entertainment side of wrestling than I ever was in like doing moonsaults and like flashy moves. Like I didn't care about that. And I never cared about that when I watched wrestling, nor do I still. I don't care about it. Like I'm far more interested in the stories and the characters. Like I honestly don't care about the matches ever. I'm way more interested in the stories and the characters. Totally. And always was when I was a kid. And so when I got into wrestling, I'm like, I'm going to do more interacting with the audience. Like I'm going to do more like fun moves. Like my finishing move was I would body slam a guy, I would surf on him and then drop an elbow. Like so simple, but the crowds would go crazy because it was different and fun. And I would do things where I would like get the crowd to do a wave. Like I would like noogie my opponents. Like I would just really make an extra effort to like involve the audience when other guys, and still to this day, I think where a lot of wrestlers make a mistake is they put too much effort into like trying to do flashy flips and all this kind of thing. And while if you could do that, that's great. But like, I think they don't put enough effort into the acting ability, involving the audience, working on your character. Like too many wrestlers in the business still to this day. And I've been fortunate to like be asked to help with like or promo classes at some wrestling schools occasionally. And I just see young kids just talking like every other wrestler that's ever talked, walking like
every macho man thing,
slapping their shoulders, like, but literally like just replicating it the same way that's always been done. And that's like the first thing that like, I'm like, if you feel yourself doing the same things that other people have done, that's your first mistake. And you should stop that immediately because you'll get stuck in it. But
right. So then, okay. So that's your history with it. And we have a good understanding of that. What I want to talk about in the rest of this podcast is the allegiances that people come to have, because wrestling is unique. It's not necessarily, people don't necessarily follow wrestlers because of their territory necessarily, to borrow a phrase that we were just using. For instance, like other sports like soccer or basketball. Oh yeah, I'm an Orlando Magic fan because I grew up in Orlando. That it really isn't the case with performers' gimmicks, or their persona and the way that they act in the ring. That's what's got to draw people in. So for a guy like you, who was a big fan, still is a big fan, but was able to perform and be in that wrestling world and understand techniques, whether it be mic skills, whether it be, how to perform a certain move, and locker room, the way that people interact in the locker room. For you, who were the guys that you followed?
You mean who the wrestlers I was into?
For someone that was so into the business.
Sure.
For someone that was so into the business, who did you like?
Yeah, well, I think it all, like, why? For me, I mean, I had a different, I think, when I got into wrestling, I never looked at it the same again. And I still, right. It's hard for me to watch it the same because I'm kind of seeing the magic tricks happen in how they're happening. And
in what way, if you don't mind breaking kayfabe?
In the ring, wrestlers are talking to each other, right, to kind of either remind each other of a sequence, a spot that's about to happen, or just, planning, if they haven't planned a lot, planning the next spot. So I see those things happening, and sometimes I can call out moves before they even happen.
Right.
Just because, like, a lot of sequences in wrestling spots are set up the same. Like, so I can kind of like see moves before they're going to happen. And a lot of things just kind of happen. A lot of things in wrestling are very repetitive. A lot of things are very formulaic. And so I definitely watch it differently. But my interests before I was a wrestler and now that after being a wrestler are still the same. I'm still way more interested in story. I'm still way more interested in character. And so before I wrestled, my favorite wrestler, and still to this day, was Sting.
Yeah.
Like, just something about him, his character, the mystique, even before he became like the gothic crow Sting, like he was that colorful surfer, vibrant.
That's right.
Cartoon character.
I forget about that because now he's just, ever since he went to NWO, he's either red and black or black and white. And before that, he was what, like neon? He was like
very neon. And that was a lot of wrestlers at the time. Ultimate Warrior was like that. Hogan, very neon. It was just a very colorful time in wrestling. And I think that, like, I was the perfect age to, like, become that dark Sting fan because it hit me in my, like, brooding teenage years where I was like, oh, F the world. Like, right. I'm angry too. Like, so I think like a lot of us a lot of us found our favorite wrestler, so to say. And a lot of people stick with that favorite wrestler their whole lives that are wrestling fans. But, like, I think they find them because they kind of relate to them in a way. Like, I don't know. Like,
yeah. Well, that's so interesting. So you love Sting, and he's still doing it, right?
He just wrestled again in AEW. And now, don't get me wrong, he wrestled what is now become famous through the pandemic, like these cinematic wrestling matches. Okay. So they'll, like, shoot them outside of the building basically. And, like, they'll take their time and they'll, like, do things a little bit more safer, but, like, are visually really cool. They're called cinematic matches.
Yeah. That's what they did for WrestleMania last year, right?
Yeah. So he, from what I hear, is only wanting to do those. But, like, after I heard after he did this recent cinematic match, he was like, man, it was actually kind of harder than a real match because it took 2 days to shoot. Jeez. So he's like, he was like, it was a lot more effort probably. But visually they're really cool and a lot more memorable.
I like Sting. I would always flip back Monday Night Wars between Nitro and
It was great.
Raw. And the way you describe Sting is, because I was thinking, when you first said Sting was my favorite, I was thinking, what is Sting's thing? Is it just that he's painting his face? But no, he's this like brooding, the
Anti-hero.
Crow, like you said. He's just a little more quiet and he's quiet like the Undertaker's quiet in like an uneasy. It makes you feel uneasy, like, whoa, what the heck? And he's got that baseball bat still, right?
I think that was what I loved about him, is there was so much mystery to him before he started speaking again. He went a whole year without speaking.
What?
A whole year, but like would come out, he would drop from the ceiling.
Yeah.
And like he would beat up the whole NWO by himself. So to me, he was just this like superhero. And his story, even at a young age, I was so interested in. He was this guy that everybody like turned their back on, and yet he still like protected them and came and saved the day, and he never turned his back on his friends. And it was just like, it was a really deep story that I was just like captivated by.
Yeah.
And it built up over a year to this match with Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And like, that was like the biggest build in wrestling. And I don't think there ever has been, where they literally started hyping it for over a year and built to this one match. And I'll never forget, it was the first pay-per-view I ever ordered. I had my friends over.
Whoa.
And I was just like stoked, like, to watch it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, as we're thinking about Sting, it's kind of like his appeal was like you said, I am, just kind of like,
it's like why I think people like Batman in a sense. Like,
yeah, a little bit.
Batman.
It was, F the world, but then he's also brooding like Robert Pattinson in Twilight,
Yeah.
The same reason why people liked Robert Pattinson in Twilight.
Same reason I love Robert Pattinson from Twilight.
And now exactly. And now he's Batman. That's incredible. That's interesting. That's interesting. What was Ultimate Warrior's gimmick?
Just a lunatic. Like,
yeah.
There was no clear understanding what he was. He was, because he'd cut promos where he's just like snorting and saying random words. So he was just like this random, like, creature. Like, there was no clear understanding of what he was. He was just like his own warrior character.
The only reason why I associate them is because of what you said earlier. They both, painted their faces.
Yeah.
And I guess that was a cool way to wear a mask without actually having to wear a mask. Yeah, I don't know what Ultimate Warrior's thing was. So some of my favorites, my ultimate was The Rock, and I just think my ultimate favorite wrestler was The Rock, just because I just felt like he had like the same skin tone as me, which I liked, and he was part of the Nation of Domination at one point, and all those dudes were so interesting. I loved D'Lo Brown. I loved The Godfather. Then there was that other guy that was just very, very serious.
Ron Simmons.
Yes. But the fun, but I also like the fun guys like Val Venus, who I mentioned before. He's so ridiculous. Like, and also when he would come on TV, I would like close my door. Like I was watching in my room. Your
mom to see?
Yeah, I was like, I don't want my grandparents to be like, what the fuck is this?
Let's paint a little picture at that time period in wrestling. They literally did an angle with that character, Val Venus, where he got his penis chopped off.
Oh my God, didn't they? They did, right?
Yep.
And his gimmick was he's a
porn star.
Porn star, yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
It
was a wild time in wrestling.
But man, how do you think he came to that? And I how do you think he settled on that gimmick? And like, I think the reason why I liked it was because this guy was so out there. He was so wild and crazy. And I was like, yeah, dude, fucking porn stars rock. That was at the time where every guy was like, I want to be a gynecologist when I grow up.
Yeah.
And like, porn stars rock. That's going to be the best job in the world. And I was like, I don't know if I was cognitively thinking of that, but I was like, man, this guy has this guy's got to figure it out.
We all thought that then, and now we're just like, that sounds exhausting.
I also, yeah, exactly. Porn sounds exhausting. Get off me. Let's just do it in a bed, damn it. Yeah, and also I like the color pink, and he would wear like pink boots and knee pads and stuff like that. Also, another hilarious dude. What'd you think of Billy Gunn? Badass Billy Gunn.
Oh, he's great. He's great. I've always thought he was awesome. I got to interview him as my marquee extreme character a couple of years ago, and just like and he is a massive dude in person.
He's
like,
wide, right?
He's
got
evenly big.
Yeah.
Like, and he's still wrestling too in AEW. Like, he's
way.
He's still doing it, man. And great shape. Like, never lost it. Like, never lost it.
Yeah, and he's got a son too that he's training.
Yeah, he's in AEW too.
Also, I liked him because he was in DX, and DX was I don't know if DX was the response to NWO.
It was.
Was it? Okay. So I don't know which came first.
NWO. Well, what was interesting and like even like deep in the story a bit is so NWO came to be because of Kevin Nash and Scott Hall went to WCW, but in the WWF before they left, they were a part of this like behind the scenes group called the Click, which was Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Shawn Michaels, and Triple H.
Whoa.
They were these group of friends that were so tight that everyone knew them as the Click. And so they would hold up the hand signals on TV to signify like, oh, we're breaking kayfabe. We're actually real friends. So that's why when they went to the WCW, they became the NWO and started doing this hand signal.
Whoa.
And that became so popular as the NWO. But then in WWF, they're like, okay, we're going to start our basically NWO type group, but it's going to be called Generation X. And early in DX, they were even doing the NWO hand signal to like back and forth on TV signify like we're still in this together. So it was like, it's really cool. And that's why I'm always like, and this is a side topic, but I would love to talk about this. Like people's first reactions about wrestling that don't know wrestling are always the same. Like, oh, how can you like wrestling? It's fake. It's bullshit. I'm like, okay, asshole. Do you watch Marvel movies and go, I can't watch Marvel movies. It's fake.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't. So why can't you watch this wrestling or just respect it or understand that it's the same thing? It's just entertainment. Like,
yeah, dude, it's choreographed. Just, you know, I mean, you know, there was a time where I was like, no, it's real. And like, you know, I don't even know what real means.
Yeah.
You know, because
but I can understand not liking it. I can understand not liking it, but don't crap on it just because you're calling it fake.
Right. Okay. I mean, what is even fake about it? You're actually falling down. People have died there.
Yep.
You know, you're talking about Sting. Sting's dropping down from the rafters post Owen Hart's death.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's more, and this is coming from somebody that like did it. I'm not saying I did it for years, but I did it for a couple years and I put a lot of my body into it. I still am injured and, you know, and I still get a little frustrated when that type of person, I'll never forget. I'm not going to name names because honestly, I don't remember who this person was, but I was at your apartment one time and somebody was like shitting on wrestling. And I got upset and I was just, because it's just like,
I wish I knew who you were talking about. Cause
I know his face. I can't think of his name. But like, I was frustrated because I'm just like, it's more real than you know, dude. Like, and like, it's just so ignorant. It's so ignorant to just go straight to the, like, it's fake. Why do you like it? Like card. It's a lot more real than people think.
I think here's the thing. Here's my breakdown of it. And this is what I believe. Sporting events, you don't always rewatch them. Movies, you can rewatch. If someone could love a sporting event and marvel at the athleticism of somebody, but if they know the result, totally ruins it for them of a sporting event. But if they know a result of a movie, they will watch it with a different type of eye and appreciate it better. Professional wrestling falls somewhere in between those two.
Yeah.
And because a lot of people who have this, you know, who do this grandstanding where they're like, oh, this isn't real, this isn't sports. They say, oh, well, the outcome is determined, and they miss the theatrics of it. It's like saying, it's like, you brought up Marvel movies. It's like watching Endgame and saying, oh, well, I know there's a funeral at the end, whatever, instead of enjoying that insane fight sequence where, Captain America's, wielding, Thor's hammer, etc. And they're kicking the shit out of Thanos. And then, Tony Stark's like, yeah, I'm Iron Man. It's too difficult for some people to appreciate because they believe the outcome is predetermined, which I think when they're walking out there, it is. However, I don't know that.
Yeah.
And man, like, do we not every 4 years watch gymnastics in the Olympics, and every four and also every 4 years, do we not watch figure skating and, create these huge celebrities like Johnny Weir, who's all over the place, and Tanya Harding, who had like, one of the greatest gimmicks of all time, like badass ice skater, So I think it gets confusing in people's minds, which is upsetting because I feel like they should be able to understand it.
There's a lot of things that like come in my head when you say all these things, because I mean, this is a conversation I have with people constantly about wrestling in particular. And I'm not saying like, you have to love wrestling. I don't like football. Like,
sure.
But I'm not knocking people that like it. And I understand why people like it. But what I'm saying is it's a different, when I would never go to somebody and be like, why do you like football? That's stupid. They're just kicking a ball around. They're just, what is like, it's kind of like,
I think what happens, I want you to finish your thought, but I think what happens is people grow up with it and they think, oh, you're still into that? Like,
yeah, they have this.
You grown out of it? Didn't you
they
figure
still
it out?
Have this image of, it's like every time somebody like imitates a wrestler in like an improv show, it's always the 80s wrestler. And that is so annoying to me. But anyways, there were two other things that like popped in my head when you were talking about that stuff, was that anytime I've ever taken somebody to a wrestling event that has never been to one, always has a good time. Always. Secondly, anytime I'm watching wrestling or like a pay-per-view or something, and my girlfriend Gabby, she's not into wrestling, but anytime I like sit her down and like explain like, okay, these who are these I'm tongue twisted. These are who these guys are. This is their history. This is why this story is kind of interesting. She's always like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, so it's like, if you look at it differently, if you take like a second to kind of like learn about the history of it a bit, there's also a great show that every time I watch it, Gabby's always into it. It's Dark Side of the Ring. Have you seen that yet?
Oh yeah. It's on YouTube, but it was through Vice, right?
Vice. Yeah. So they like, talk about like some of the more controversial topics in wrestling and take a real deep dive. And she's always into it. Like we watched the episode on, I believe it was Eddie Guerrero or something.
Oh yes. Eddie Guerrero.
We were both crying our eyes out. And it's just like, so it's like, once you realize that, yes, it's predetermined, it's choreographed, but these are real people.
Right.
Like, so it's, yes, they're playing characters, but there's also such a huge element of truth to it and reality that will never be fake. Like these guys,
these people you're talking, the issue is people that don't like wrestling, they can't just dismiss it. They have to aggressively tell you. Yes. And they're also the same people that are quick to point out continuity errors in movies.
Yep.
Shut up. What do I care?
Exactly.
What do I care? Up. The mug was in my left hand. Now it's in my right hand. Grow up. Okay. Suspend your disbelief for 90 minutes. Okay. Yep. Just grow up, forget about it. And they don't have to do it so aggressively. And I don't know why. I don't know why it has to be that way.
Yeah. It's always the same type of person.
Ugh. I wish I could name names. I forgot this one guy's name I don't like. But in fact, we will talk about this in just a moment. we went to a pay-per-view, and it was an
Mm.
incredible time in 2011. Before we get to that, what other gimmicks, like big gimmicks, do you remember? As far as, I liked, like I said, Billy Gunn, because he was part of this tag team with him and Road Dogg Jesse James, and I love the Road Dogg's mic skills. Like, and I don't even know what Road Dogg was.
Everybody could recite his, like, remember that speech he would always give before his matches?
Badass Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg Jesse James. Oh, you didn't know? You better call somebody. And sometimes he would
wait, no, what was it?
That was The Rock. Yeah.
Oh, that was, yeah, but
sometimes he would throw in this. Wait, what was it? Go ahead.
I can't remember, but back then, every one of us could state that speech he would give before his matches.
Yes.
No, Jesse James, badass Billy Gunn. That whole speech we could all recite.
I think in his private life, he might have been like a juggalo because he would have fit in that world. But his music started off with, "Oh, you didn't know? You better and then, dude, the music was incredible.
I loved it. That was something that, like, involved the audience. I think anything that always involved the audience, like repeatable catchphrases, like people also ate up.
Sometimes on the mic, he would be like, he would throw in this. "Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody." And then when he said, I was like, "Oh man, that's great." And yes, at the time, Undertaker,
oh God, was basically becoming a Satanist.
But he was coming out to Limp Bizkit's Rollin'.
Oh no, so that was after he went through his, like, gothic phase. He then, like, transition into this character that was more like his actual human self of just like this biker, like, and he'd come out on a motorcycle to Limp Bizkit.
And yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously Undertaker, the dead man, he was like, I felt like there were tears, and like the guys that were competing for the overall championship, like
A-listers, the big, yeah.
Rock, Undertaker, and like,
can we talk about Ric Flair for a second?
Dude, we've got to. And then? Okay, so I can't just focusing on gimmicks, because I want to break down the gimmicks and like the type of people that love them, but like everybody knows and has an appreciation for Ric Flair, and I want to hear from you why. But I get the impression off of every interview that I've seen, every promo he's cut, off of every recollection of him, that Flair was the technical master. He made other people look good. He was great in the what's it called, in the locker room, and he always gave 1,000%.
Yeah.
Like, you see him
every match
screaming and like just
taking all his clothes off.
Why do you think Ric Flair was universally loved? Because he was the nature boy, and what was his gimmick? He was like, "I'm naturally amazing at everything."
He's like he was like a womanizer. Like, he was just like a woman's, like, he just like ladies man to the extreme, like lived this like lavish life. Like, so I think there was a lot of reasons people were into him. There were like guys wanted to be him, girls wanted to date him. Like, and it wasn't that he was this hot dude. He was just like beyond confident.
Yeah.
Like, but I think it went further than that, because like you said, it's like the wrestlers loved him because he gave so much of himself to make them look good. Yeah. Every match was great. He could make anybody look good. He was the best on the mic. Like,
he just gave 1,000%.
Oh my God, dude. And just universally loved. Everybody wanted to like party with him. Like, just.
Is it true that he lived the gimmick?
From what I hear, I think so. Like, man. And that's why, like, recently he had some health issues, because he went real hard in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, like, and into the 2000s. He had his last match, I think, in 2011. Like,
wow.
And he probably would still wrestle today if people would let him.
My God. Yeah. He's wild, man. But yes, universally loved, and just because he gave it all. I mean, and also,
I want to take back. I didn't mean to say womanizer, like a woman's man. Like, you know what I mean? Womanizer is a bit negative, I think.
Yeah, he was. I mean, there are different shades of that term, I think,
Sure.
especially today. But I think that I don't know if you'll agree with me, but he just definitely gloated about how rich he was and how many women he
Yeah. So,
was
I mean,
with,
I guess you could look at it as like a womanizer in a sense.
I don't know the right.
How you look at that word, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know the right word for it, but he was banging babes, dude. Let's just.
But he was very open about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And yeah, live the gimmick, and also as far as catchphrases go, we're gonna get into the pay-per-view that we went to because it's so historic. But as soon as we walked into the arena, this is 2011. Woo! Everybody, woo!
Everybody, yep.
And it's like a call and response thing as people are just walking into the arena. Woo! Everyone's doing the woo. I mean,
was that your first wrestling match you had ever been to?
I had been to a house show.
Okay.
So,
those were great though. House shows were always awesome.
I went to a house show in my hometown in Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and I saw X-Pac win the Intercontinental Championship in a house show.
Damn.
But he won it, but then the ref, was like, no, you can't, the ref DQ'd him because he knocked out the ref or something like that. And then I remember seeing Badass Billy Gunn, and I got, instead of a foam finger, I got a foam ass. And I put it on my hand. It's somewhere in my grandma's garage somewhere.
Oh, it's so amazing.
Oh, it was so awesome. It was so awesome. Yeah, Flair, great gimmick. You know what's interesting? I didn't know about the term kayfabe or anything like that until recently when, Mark Calloway, Undertaker, was starting to talk about things. Stone Cold was starting to talk things. Can't talk about the Attitude Era without Stone Cold. He was like the man.
Oh, I don't think there's ever been a more popular wrestler. I don't know. I think he may have been more popular than Hulk Hogan. I think.
Absolutely. I love Stone Cold. Dude, I have the Stone Cold belt.
Yeah.
But and I love Stone Cold, but I was like, that's cheating because everybody loves Stone Cold. You know what I mean? But dude, Mick Foley, Mankind. And I mentioned the kayfabe thing because he was so active with all of his gimmicks. Cactus Jack, Mick Foley, Mankind.
He would interchange them. He'd jump back and forth.
Yeah, and he created, what's now the 24/7 title, but at the time it was the hardcore title.
Uh-huh.
Oh, man, dude, those matches were so fun to watch. But I loved him, and I couldn't tell you who Cactus Jack is, but Mick Foley was just this sincere guy that was, not particularly built like the other guys, but he would sell out all the time, like, jumping off the cage, whatever. Like, that's what I saw. Not even just like giving blood, but just like he would always go full force on like a flip or a bump or whatever it was. And I don't know what was the Mankind gimmick? I forget that.
It was originally supposed to be a little bit like Hannibal Lecter, I think. Like he would come into this like violin music and just be this like creepy beaten monster. Who's
like a Quasimodo type.
A little bit like, like a mix of those kind of characters. And
mask, yeah.
And then it evolved into just its own thing, like a lot of characters do. Like he then became this like happy, fan-loving psychopath in a sense, because he'd be like real happy, but then he'd also jump off of the Hell in a Cell, So,
yeah, and he had the sock on his hand, and that was his like
Socko
move. Yeah,
Socko out of his underwear and like
the rock and sock mouth. The rock and sock combination. I mean, who are the type of people that liked Mankind? Because he's kind of like a son of Ric Flair, where he would always make everybody look good. And, and this is just my recollection, always make people look good, always sell out, give 110% all he could. And just, was just wild. Like, I don't like who did I think he was like another maybe universally loved guy.
He was universally loved. And I think it was for different reasons. I think people recognized how much of his body he was giving to these matches. Like before him, nobody had ever fallen off of the Hell in the Cell, and that almost killed him. But it was more not just the fall off the Hell in the Cell, but the fall through and onto the ring was even more of an intense bump and wasn't planned. Like that was actually something they planned the fall off the top, but the fall through the cage in that same match minutes later is something that was not planned, that was actually far, far more brutal and actually gave him like serious internal injuries. And then he came back at like the end of the night, like, and I think it was that fall through the cage that like he lost a tooth and it somehow went into his nose. Like if you watch that tape back there, one of his teeth are in his nose, in his nostril.
I mean, what a
so change. I think he became universally respected. Like, instead of just like someone like Stone Cold, it was just everybody loved him because he was this guy that was fighting authority and like beating his boss up, and everybody wanted to relate to that. But for Foley, like people respected the shit out of him.
Who were, before we get into our pay-per-view experience, and then I want to get your WrestleMania predictions. Who do you think had the most out there gimmick, whether it, be short-lived or on forever? Because some of the guys, as you think about that, some of the guys that stick out to me that I liked, I like Ken Shamrock, but I didn't know why. I was just like, oh, he was kind of like a UFC guy before UFC was popular, and he would always get people to submit. He would be in those submission matches. Who else do I remember? I love
Goldust was a pretty out there gimmick for the time.
Oh yeah, he was crazy. Weird people liked Goldust.
He was a weird character at the time, very controversial at the time. And fun fact, he because he was this kind of like, evolved into this like creepy Marilyn Manson kind of thing. But he apparently like wanted to go all the way with this gimmick and get like breast implants, and like he was like really invested in making it like something very different. That was a weird character.
Yeah, and Marilyn Manson was popular at the time, so I could see them, I could see, looking back on it, I could see where wrestlers would go to pop culture, turn on MTV, and just be like, all right, how can I get a version of that? There
was a whole wrestling group at the time called the Oddities. Remember the Oddities? Where there was a guy that his name was Golga, and he wore this brown mask, but he would just carry a Cartman doll. And that was his whole character. His whole character was he was obsessed with Cartman because South Park was huge at the time. That was it.
Like that. I mean, I get the rate.
They were insanely popular.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm just thinking about traditional wrestling and like the luchadors, like Rey Mysterio and those guys, those high flyers. Oh, who was then? Yeah, I think was this the tail end of the Attitude Era where Edge and Christian became popular, and then the Hardy Boys, right?
It was still pretty much in the heat of it. Like they were the group that really made famous like the ladder match and the TLC type of match, and another group that I think they were cool. They were young and cool. Like Jeff Hardy had crazy colored hair. Like everybody thought they were cool. I remember kids at my school would dress like them. Like, but I think they were another also that were not only cool, but were respected because of the crazy things they were doing in ladder matches and that kind of thing.
There was a gimmick. Yeah. And that was their gimmick. Their gimmick was like extreme. And then, they would do those moonsaults that you're talking about, and, things that I would try on the trampoline. And and so there was a gimmick for everyone to like latch on to, the popular kids, the jocks, that's like the A-listers, then, the weirdos, the Goldust, freaks and geeks, just kind of liking who would be, Edge, Christian, the Dudleys, those sorts of things. Is the same representation, is there the same sort of representation now as there was then, or has it expanded, or do you not think that there is as much representation?
It's different. I think there's still like very defined characters that a lot of people can relate to, but then there's a lot of gray areas. Wrestling's very interesting right now. I'm not a huge WWE fan with what they're putting out right now. I mean, I am understanding in that like it's a very weird time with the pandemic, but You then have AEW on the other station, this new, fresh company that, in my opinion, is giving such great wrestling content. Anybody listening
Really?
that listens like, man, I want to revisit and watch some wrestling. Watch AEW. Watch AEW before you watch anything.
How can you find them?
It's on TNT every Wednesday night.
Oh, okay.
But it's the best wrestling on television right now. You get a little bit of everything. You get some like wrestlers from the past, like Christian is in it, Sting is in it, Chris
Really?
Jericho. So you get some big wrestlers from the past, but you also get like the future and some just like crazy high flying matches. So you get a lot of everything. But
Wow.
it's a long-winded. It's hard to say because there are still characters everybody can relate to, but there's also a lot of like, I think wrestling's going through a weird transition right now that I think is heading towards a kind of a renaissance in wrestling. But I don't know. It's hard to answer that.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I'll check out AEW. And wow, Jericho's still doing it, huh?
Yeah. And he's probably having some of the best matches of his career right now.
No kidding. He's at the top of his game.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That is wild. What was his gimmick? I mean, was he just like, I don't remember what his gimmick was.
I think he was one of those that like just the larger than life version of himself that in a way that's why like Stone Cold got popular is because it was just like, that was who he really was. And there's a phrase that's like used so damn much in wrestling, but just cranked up to 11. Like he took what he was and went over the top with it and people loved it. And I think the same is said with Chris Jericho. He's this kind of like loudmouth rock star character. But that's just very much him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned it earlier. Anytime you bring somebody to a pay-per-view, it's exciting. And I was lucky enough to go to my only WWE pay-per-view ever with you in Tampa. This is the Extreme Rules pay-per-view in 2011. I believe it was May 2011. And holy moly, dude, it was wild. I mean, we got to see Randy Orton, CM Punk, Kofi Kingston, Sheamus. Was Sheamus like a continuation of Ken Shamrock, but kind of like up the Irishness to 11?
I see what you're saying. I don't know. I wouldn't say like a version of Ken Shamrock. I think that he just is just like very much like something I think is a very boring thing in WWE is the you're Irish, you're gonna be the Irish guy, like
right,
God,
the Irishman, and your matches are all 3.5 hours long, and you have insane CGI.
But Christian won the world title that night, which was huge.
Big Show and Kane wrestled as a tag team.
But it was every match was like a hardcore extreme match, but it wasn't what happened during the show that was the most interesting.
Well, first off, and who else? We also saw Rey Mysterio and Cody Rhodes, I think. The main event was Cena against Miz.
Yeah, in a cage match.
Whoa, I mean, insane. So anyhow, we get there, like we talked about before. The ending is insane, and I can't wait to talk about it. But we get there, and immediately, like, I don't know why. I don't know why. We were just like hanging out a lot at the time. We were living in Florida, and I was like
high at that period of time.
I didn't have it in my plans that week to go to a WWE pay-per-view.
I think it happened very quickly.
But someone was like, "Hey, I got these extra tickets. I can't go. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, let's do it." Like, I think at the time I wasn't thinking twice about anything, a mentality that I continue to grasp onto these days. But, we go there and everyone's woo, everyone's going nuts. And, I didn't really get into Cena. I didn't really like Cena. I thought, maybe he's like the continuation of Hogan. I don't know. How would you pick Cena? Like,
I think a lot of people are in the same boat as you. I think a lot of people love to hate him. But since he's been gone, I think a lot of people realize, like, damn, he was really good in a lot of ways. I think over the years, many people wanted him to become like a bad guy, and he never, ever, ever became one.
He never turned heel, ever.
Ever.
Wow.
So yeah, I think, but a lot of people echoed that at the time. It's just like, I think because he was very oversaturated. Like
Oh,
he was
right.
very oversaturated and just beat everybody, you know?
And yeah, and these matches were all intense. Falls count anywhere matches, steel cage, like you mentioned, a lumberjack match. And they were just so fun to watch because, and I've gotta compare it to football. I've been to football games. They're not as fun to watch unless you're on TV or unless they're on TV in your home, as opposed to being there. Because when you're there, it's like there's no commentary. I appreciate the commentary, or I appreciate being able to like get up and like not have to sit, there for like 3 hours. But I thought I was going to experience the same thing, but no, it was so much fun, so exciting. It was a full event, and this arena in Tampa, I think it's where I don't know what they call it, but it's where the Tampa Bay Lightning play, the hockey team. Yeah, it is, because I remember now outside they had lightning statues and whatnot, and the arena was packed, and it was a Sunday night. And so what else do you remember about that night? Because you were talking about how when you watch wrestling now, you can tell what's about to happen and you watch it differently. I remember watching that Christian ladder match. I forget who he was playing.
Edge came back that night. That was the first time that Edge came back and kind of helped him, that was a really cool moment. But truthfully, the thing I remember the most, very honest, despite or other than what we have yet to mention, was that we were in a suite and I had yet to ever experience a suite of any kind.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we had a bathroom right there and that I could walk right outside and get pizza, I was just like,
cool.
I'm in heaven. I'm like, this is great seats, bathroom right here. It was so sick.
We were so lucky to just back into those things. Okay, so main event, John Cena defeats The Miz. And by the way, one of the funniest things my grandpa ever said, this has nothing to do with either of them, but there's this guy named Maven. You remember Maven? And he was on like the WWE. Yes, exactly. And that was a reality show, right?
Yeah.
Basically. And my grandpa saw him and he knew I was a big fan of The Rock. And he was like, "Who's this guy?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's Maven." He goes, "Oh, we'll call him the Pebble." Because he kind of had that same rock. He's had that same Rock swagger. But okay, John Cena retains the WWE Championship, and then everything's over. And then what do you remember?
We thought everything was over, and then all of a sudden, Cena grabs the mic, and we're like, "Oh, he's just going to cut a post-match promo."
Was that common or no?
It could be, but it was we all could tell that the show was over. Right. So it was not uncommon that wrestlers would leave the audience with something else. Like it was very common in the past for when Stone Cold was wrestling that he would come down or do like a beer celebration for people even after the show stopped airing as like sending the fans off with something special. So that's all I thought this was like, thank you guys so much for being here. Like, love you guys, like that kind of thing. But no, Cena grabbed the mic.
I'm going to play the audio.
Okay.
I'm going to play the audio.
I walk out here every night with hustle, loyalty, and respect on my sleeve. That is a credo I have adopted from the men and women who defend the freedom of this country.
Going crazy.
We have caught and compromised to a permanent end Osama bin Laden.
I mean,
there's nothing more American than being at a wrestling match, being told that Osama bin Laden was taken down by John Cena.
And if you remember, the person that broke the news was The Rock.
Wait, what?
So The Rock, oh man, this is part of the story. So The Rock knew somebody he had a relative who knew someone in SEAL Team 6.
No way.
And he was the first person to tweet it out. And so I was getting everyone was starting to get notifications around when Cena came out.
Wait, did you find out before Cena made the announcement?
No, I found out. I didn't look at my phone because I figured something was happening. But then I immediately saw on Twitter that The Rock had, proclaimed that Osama bin Laden was dead, and he was the first person, like, before even news outlets. But yes, being there in Tampa, packed crowd, all-American John Cena comes out, addresses the crowd. We have compromised Osama bin Laden. I mean, dude, can you imagine the weight of delivering that information? You can't stutter. You can't smirk.
It's also the biggest or the most positive reaction John Cena's ever received. Like, people hated him at that time. So he's like, please let me tell this. Please let me tell this.
Dude, yes, exactly. You nailed it right on the head. So American. We're in Florida. We're at a WWE pay-per-view, and John Cena delivers this news. I mean, I'll never
unforgettable. Like, very surreal. Like you heard in the audio, like the place erupted.
It was insane. And this was after, how long was the pay-per-view? Like 2-3 hours?
3.5 hours, maybe.
And everybody was jacked up. We were ready to go for another 3 hours.
Give us more.
Show us the body, That's what we wanted, man.
Oh, God.
Absolutely insane. And incredibly memorable. I'm not saying that if you go to a WWE pay-per-view that an enemy of the United States will die.
Likely that's not going to happen.
But you know what? I'm 1 for 1. So we'll see. If we need Putin compromised to an end.
Compromised.
I love it. All right, speaking of pay-per-views, the biggest one of them all, WrestleMania is coming up. Any predictions for WrestleMania before I get you out of here?
Honestly, I have to be very truthful. I'm excited to watch it, but I haven't kept track lately with the WWE or what they're doing. I do know that one of the main events is really interesting to me, though. It's Roman Reigns, who is the champion, versus Daniel Bryan versus Edge. And
Whoa.
Edge didn't wrestle for 10 years. I mean, here's a story for that match is Daniel Bryan and Edge were both told they could never wrestle again because they had neck injuries.
Whoa.
They both came back. They both fought, worked, and healed themselves, basically. Daniel Bryan only after a couple years, but Edge didn't wrestle for 10 years, and now he's back.
Whoa.
And Roman Reigns is really one of the most captivating wrestlers in the WWE right now. He's like the main heel. For people who don't know, that means like the main villain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a triple threat. And it's like, that to me is the coolest story. It's like you got this guy who's the current big dog in the company, and then these two guys who were told they'd never wrestle again for the championship. So it's a really cool story. And there's some other matches. Like, my girlfriend Gabby is interested because freaking Bad Bunny is wrestling. Like,
oh, isn't he the 24/7 champion?
The 24/7 champion. Yeah.
Still,
he took the belt on SNL, which was a really cool moment.
Yeah, that was insane. I thought there was going to be a match right there. I thought someone was going to come out and try and pin him right there.
That would have been cool.
24/7 is hardcore rules, so you can, as long as you have
pins
a referee,
count anywhere. Yeah.
Oh my! As long as you have a referee.
Yep.
It can go anywhere. That's insane.
It's ridiculous. It's a good way to incorporate celebrities. It's like a really fun way to.
Gronkowski had it, right?
Yeah.
Dude,
a lot of celebrities.
Has anybody like brought a camera crew and a referee into someone's like bedroom and then just like been underneath the bed and then just reached their hand up and then just put it on them as they were sleeping?
That's genius. I don't know if they've done that.
1, 2, 3. Like quietly.
They've done weird, crazy things. I don't know if they've done that, but like it's a fun, sometimes gets ridiculous championship. But
I love it.
There's some other matches that are interesting, and the women's wrestling in WWE is at an all-time high. Like,
that's right.
They have just such amazing wrestlers. There's a match, Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair, which I'm really excited about. Bianca Belair is this new female wrestler who is just she's going to be a superstar, dude.
Really?
Very much excited for that. Other than that, I'm kind of watch it for the entertainment of it, and but couldn't tell you really much past that.
Do you think
they've also thrown it together very quickly? Like,
oh, really?
They've just announced most of the matches within the past 2 weeks,
and it's in Tampa.
Yeah.
Oh, how cool! And
it was
also
supposed to be last year, and then
right, and then they did those cinematic matches, right?
Everything was taped within their performance center in front of no audience, which was trippy.
That's wild, man. Do you think Edge will win the championship?
It's looking like it. I think so.
Okay.
His comeback story has been pretty captivating, and he's in great shape still, man. Like, he's doing awesome.
Good for him, man. All right, last thing. If you had to take one wrestler and you have to, of all time, have to pledge your ultimate allegiance to him, who is it and why?
Sting, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a diehard. Like,
Hell
still
yeah.
to this day. You know, I think that he was in the WWE for a couple years recently. I think that they like missed the ball in some of the potential matches that they could have made a fortune with. Like, Sting and Undertaker were in the same company, and they for years never gave the fans the match they wanted. Like, that's the match I always wanted, and I'll never see it. Like,
Sting versus Undertaker.
Wow. And could have gotten it multiple times. Sting verbally said he wanted it multiple times. For some reason, it just never happened. But like, it's cool that now he's in AEW and he's getting the conclusion to his career that he wanted, because he wasn't getting it in WWE. But yeah, diehard Sting fan.
Heck yeah, man. If I had to go with one person, man, you know what the road, I would have to say Road Dogg, just because just because he also reminds me of a morning show rock jock. You know, like, he kind of looks like him. He had like the beaded hair, and white boy dreads or whatever. But he reminds me of every morning DJ in.
That's
Florida.
So accurate.
That might have been his gimmick.
Should have been.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody. That's how
Road Dogg in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I let my neighbors know that I'm home. All right, Shane. Well, thanks for joining us, Floridians. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.